With 2022 now underway, let's get into some of the top technology trends and stories that are likely to shape the year ahead. Hey, what up? It's your boy MobbJustice back again, and welcome to everyone in 2022. And for today, because it is the start of the year, we thought that we'd get into what are likely to be some of the technology trend and drivers that are going to shape the year that is to come ahead. As always, this video is brought to you by the team over at Liyon Media. Head on over to check out some of the crispiest photo, video, and audio content. That's www.lionmedia.com. Head on over, check it out, and just see what the team can do for you. As I said, we are going to be looking at some of those technologies that are likely going to shape the year, and I've actually broken this up into a number of different sections because I think that there are certain technologies and certain companies within the sector that are likely to be pushing, certain technologies or certain advancements ahead. Because it is the start of the year, one of the first things that does happen is something called CES. That is the Consumer Electronics Show. This tends to be a showcase for some of the big technologies that companies such as LG, Samsung, and the like are developing, and a lot of prototypes, a lot of design concepts, a lot of new things are shown off at CES, and I picked out a couple of things that stood out for me. Now, CES, which is currently happening as we're recording this video, is typically not the place that companies show off new phones, right? Because usually we have keynotes and companies like having their own events. But we did see some interesting concepts coming out, such as Samsung. Samsung has actually showed off a rollable device, which I think really looks cool. Some people are actually thinking that this could be future beyond the slabs that we're used to, as well as the foldable devices that Samsung has really been good with. We saw the Z Flip together with the Z Fold, and now we're talking about rollable devices. When LG came to a shutdown of its mobile division last year, one of the devices that had been promised from that company was a rollable phone. So it's really great to see that someone has taken up that mantle. One of the things that CES is famous for is that we usually get to see a lot of television sets and technologies, and this year has been no different. And for me, there's two things that are standing out. The first one is that we've seen a couple of TVs that have come out, particularly if I remember correctly, should be LG, and they've been showing off a lot of 8K panels, OLED, and the like. And for me, first, it's 8K, right? It's really interesting to see how much adoption this technology is going to get in 2022. As I said in my TV buying guide last year, I think 4K is the sweet spot, simply because there's still so much content that's being produced that is still in standard definition and high definition. So even getting to 4K, there's still a big deficit that's there. So getting to that 8K range, it would be great to see where that technology goes. And then the second bit is that I think LG has actually shown off a couple of devices that have hubs, so gaming hubs, where a person can connect a controller and you have access to some of the cloud gaming platforms, Stadia, Stadia and the like. And I think that would really be great because just as with streaming, for video, I'm sure gamers must be getting a bit of fatigue because there's so many different platforms. So if you can create a hub, that might be a big opportunity for TV manufacturers going forward. So this video was actually shot a day or two before BMW actually showed off their concept car, which actually changes colors, and I really think that was probably one of the coolest things that I saw out of CES. Like anything that's a concept, I'm really interested to see, how long is it going to take for us to get like a car like this that people can actually buy. And also at the same time, if you have a color changing car, like what color do you actually register that thing in. Moving away from CES, we want to get into some stuff about Apple, and there are three areas that I want to focus on. The first one is just around Apple Silicon. We've seen a lot of progress that has been made from Apple moving its machines, particularly computing devices, away from being Intel based to having their own chips. This started with the M1 chips, and then we've actually seen the M1 Pro as well as the M1 Max, right? So with that in mind, what's left now is two big categories. The first one will be the bigger iMac. Last year we saw the release of the 24-inch iMac, which came in a number of different colors. So now we hope to see some upgraded internals for the bigger size screen, as well as to see whether we're gonna have just a bigger screen or whether we're gonna also have something like an iMac Pro, as we saw a couple of years back. And tied to that, the desktop device, the big tower, that's what a lot of people are waiting for, especially people that are professionals. There's a Mac tower that's there right now, and a lot of people anticipating that if we get a tower that has those chips inside, that is likely to be a beast. Keeping with this issue of chips, we also wait to see what other companies are also going to be coming up with their own chipsets. We've already seen Samsung has been in the game for quite a while now, and we recently saw Google on the mobile side coming out with its Tensor chips. But particularly companies that rely on Intel chips, what's going to happen? Are they going to keep that going forward, or are people going to be switching more and more to things like AMD? Or are we going to be seeing more companies saying that they want to take on the cost and also research and development for their own in-house chipsets? The next one is obviously the biggest device that Apple produces in every year, and that is the new iPhone. We saw the iPhone 13 range coming out in September last year, and this year we anticipate an iPhone 14, maybe it might be a 13S. But two of the biggest ones is that, one, could this be the year that we see Apple getting rid of the notch on the device? Many of you know that I'm not a fan of the notch, but I really do think that Apple has actually kept that notch as a way to make their phones easily identifiable, amongst the CEO phones that are out there. So firstly, could we see getting rid of the notch? And then second, could this be the year that we move to USB-C in line with other Apple devices such as the MacBooks as well as the iPads? Or will we see them completely getting rid of a port for charging in favor of something like MagSafe? And with the theme of those ports, could we see Apple actually bringing back more ports as we saw them doing with the M1 Pro and Max MacBook Pros, the 14 and 16 inch, where we saw them bringing back HDMI, SD, as well as MagSafe, right? Could we see other things like that happening? Because Apple has presented itself as a company that is listening to customers. Could we see other types of listening going forward in 2022? Moving on to Facebook. Yes, I'm calling them Facebook. They want us to know them as Meta, but for me, I'm still trying to get around that, so we're going to refer to them as Facebook. And they released their plans around the metaverse last year. Mark Zuckerberg giving quite a presentation at the end of last year, so it would be great to see where all of that goes. The other piece to consider is what are we going to do with the metaverse, because we've seen a number of different players coming out with their own versions. I think I saw something around Microsoft and its metaverse. Are we going to be having interlinked metaverses? Are we going to have one overarching metaverse? How is all of that going to develop? Because one can almost see an arms war of some sort going on. And then at the same time, we've seen Facebook making some interesting moves in the last couple of years. A couple of years ago, they released plans for a digital coin, which started off being called Libra, and now it's called DM. And one could actually see that DM coin being a method of transaction, right, in the metaverse, right? So one waits to see what the development of the metaverse will be, what type of business models are going to be given around the metaverse, and also what other pieces is Facebook going to institute as part of the overarching plan. Now, a discussion about Facebook would not be complete without us at least addressing some element of privacy. Last year, we spent a lot of time talking about the privacy concerns around their WhatsApp platform. So one waits to see in 2022, are we going to see a continuation, of that theme where once again Facebook finds itself in even more hot water, because it seems almost every year, whether we're talking about Cambridge Analytica or whether we're talking about the way that the Instagram algorithm works, whether we're talking about WhatsApp's changing privacy policy, what type of hot water are Mark Zuckerberg and his company going to find themselves in the year to come? One of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about on this platform is social media and its development, and this year I'm waiting to see whether Instagram is going to retain its place as the social media platform, because there's a lot of things that are popping up, and one in particular is TikTok. And TikTok presents quite an interesting case because its feature has actually been replicated on a number of different platforms when one thinks about YouTube Shorts, but more importantly Instagram Reels. And we saw Instagram doing the same thing to Snapchat a couple of years ago, and many people have actually even forgotten what Snapchat is about. So one waits to see whether TikTok will be able to defend its place better than what the likes of Snapchat were able to do a couple of years ago. In terms of technologies and platforms that I will be keeping an eye on in the year to come, there are three that come to mind. The first one is Fintech, or financial technology. That's really been a big area of investment for startups on the African continent. One can think about the most popular example, which is M-Pesa, which is run by Vodacom as well as Safaricom, peer-to-peer mobile payments. But the rest of the sector has really been attracting a lot of attention. So we've seen a lot of money going to startups both in West Africa and East Africa that are innovating around this space. But recently we've also seen a lot of money now coming to the Southern Africa region, particularly South African startups. One can think about Jumo, one can think about another one such as Ozo, and we wait to see what the space is going to look like. But once again, this is likely going to continue to be a big area of investment and innovation in Africa. Electric vehicles are something that I've been very interested in for a number of years. I've always wanted to own a Tesla Model S, for example, but on a continent where even having reliable supplies of power is a problem, one wonders, right, if Africa is going to be left behind when it comes to the electrical vehicle revolution. South Africa has made a lot of strides in putting in place the charging infrastructure in some of the major towns as well as some of the highways. So I'm keen to see how that's going to develop, particularly because the likes of Tesla are yet to come to South Africa, despite Elon Musk being a South African himself. But it's exciting to see that companies like Audi have actually committed to launch a number of electric vehicles, for the South African market, and one hopes that things like that are going to filter into neighboring countries. The last one on technologies and platforms for me is podcasts. You'll know that I am a big podcast fan. I produce podcasts for ourselves as Liyon Media as well as for clients, and also in the work that I do, I am a podcast host. So very interested in this space. What I'm quite interested in is how people are going to find ways to monetize our podcasts. There's a lot of different business models that people have been playing around with, but in 2022, are we going to see new ones developing, or are we going to see some of the existing ones, growing further and perhaps, come up with something that's dominant in the same way that advertising, has become sort of the staple in the world of radio and television. As we close off, I just wanted to give two honorable mentions to stories that have recently come out. The first one is around the fact that this week actually marked the end of support for the BlackBerry platform, right? If anyone has been using a BlackBerry, over the years and, kept to it, despite the development of iOS and Android, that support actually ended on January the 4th, and it actually brings to an end quite an era. I had a BlackBerry back in the day, and I remember when everyone was on BlackBerry Messenger. Sad to see that coming to an end, so definitely an honorable mention from us. And then the second one is about the fact that JP Morgan, one of the biggest investment banks in the world, recently got fined for actually using WhatsApp by some of its traders, because regulators actually said that because it's an encrypted platform, they couldn't see or read the messages that traders were sending and receiving between themselves. And that actually begs the question of what type of implications that's gonna have, first when it comes to regulating communications platforms, and then secondly what the development of some of these platforms will be going forward. Are regulators going to force things like professions like traders, for example, from using things like iMessage, things like WhatsApp, and use something that can be seen? What does that mean for other professions that are also similarly regulated? So that's been it for today. There's a lot that we covered, but at the same time there is a lot that we missed out. You can let us know in the comments, what are you interested in? What have you been watching? What will you be paying attention to in 2022 when it comes to the world of innovation, the world of technology, the world of media? What are you interested in, or what worries you, what concerns you? You can let us know in the comments, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.
Hey, this is Baby G, and you're watching the Mob Justice channel. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Live it, love it, like it. This is the Mob Justice TV.